Okay, it's 5:30, so I will call this regularly scheduled meeting of the Shawnee Mission School District Board of Education to order. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our next item is the adoption of the agenda. I'll seek a motion.
So move, Goodburn.
Is there a second?
Second, Sinclair.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The next item on our agenda is public comment. I'm going to read through this kind of as quick as I can. A time for public comment currently occurs at regularly scheduled Board of Education meetings to provide an opportunity for individuals to address the board regarding school district issues. Patrons must submit a request to make public comment no later than noon on the day of a regularly scheduled board meeting. This evening, it's being held between 5:30 and 6 p.m. Instructions for how to submit electronic submission of your notice to speak. You can go to our Board of Education webpage, or you can email our board clerk, Terry Wintering, at smsd.org. A request for auxiliary aids or services for persons needing assistance to address the board should be made with appropriate advance notice so the district can meet that request. And here are a few reminders to help speakers who have constructive and positive experience when presenting your comments to the board. Please proceed to the podium when your name is called and share your name, city of residency, what schools your children attend if applicable, and the name of any group or organization you are representing. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes or less, as indicated by the timer that will go off on your timer over there. In consideration of everyone's time, please select a group spokesperson to represent your interests, or you can choose to pass when your name is called if a previous speaker has already expressed your concerns. Written comments and materials will be accepted, and if you could give those to Terry, that would be great. And if you could include at least 8 copies, one for each board member and the superintendent. Please make your comments while remaining behind the podium. Complaints regarding students or staff should first be addressed to administration in accordance with Board Policy K and complaints. If that procedure has been completed, the board may then consider whether to hear such complaints in executive session in order to protect the privacy interests of the students and or staff involved. If comments pertain to an item on tonight's agenda, we may ask Dr. Fulton or his or her designee to address that comment if possible. Generally, responses from board members during public comment are limited to clarifying questions. And we will just get started. And I do not see Representative Jerry Stockstill here this evening, so I'm going to skip him unless he comes in later. So that means our first commenter is Laura Smith Everett.
I need a box.
I think we do have a box.
I'm kind of serious, but I can do tiptoes. It's all right. We'll accommodate. Hello, my name is Laura Smith Everett, and I have come to you tonight to advocate for ongoing mask wearing for unvaccinated populations for the next school year. I serve in several different roles. I am a mother of 3 Shawnee Mission School children, McAuliffe Elementary and Trail Ridge Middle School. I am an innovation specialist at Comanche Elementary. And lastly, I am an elected member of our community, just like you, and serve as a trustee at JCCC. First, I would like to thank each of you for serving our school district and our community as a volunteer. I know the passion, the dedication, and the volunteer time it takes to fulfill these roles, and I thank you for being part of our Board of Education. You are needed and you are valued in our community. My husband is the director of a local biopharmaceutical lab. While he is not an epidemiologist, he is a scientist and does regularly read the most up-to-date scientific literature and shares it at the dinner table, for better or for worse. One of the things I have learned from him that perhaps does not get explained enough about in the coverage of COVID is that a virus's number one job is to stay alive as an infective agent. This is to say that a virus will do everything it can to continue to replicate and spread. Without hosts, it cannot exist. Some viruses are better at this than others, but as we have seen with COVID-19, it is incredibly adept at morphing and reproducing in new strains. This keeps the virus transmitting and spreading to as many hosts as it can for as long as it can. Therefore, it is incredibly important for us to understand that even as our community vaccination rate continues to rise, the virus will, by its very nature, continue to adapt to ensure it continues to spread. Just because the virus hasn't appeared or had detrimental effects in one population in the past, let's say children, for example, does not mean that it can't do so in the future. Masks are one of the easiest and cheapest ways to ensure that we keep children safe until a majority can be completely vaccinated. The virus will continue to take advantage of whatever hosts are available until there is no other population to go to. As a teacher, I will tell you that children are hilarious and life-giving, but also can kind of be gross sometimes. This school year, I watched as one of our kindergartners took the orange slices from his mouth and placed them on my principal's eyes while she was helping him with his lunch. Children sneeze into other people's faces. They wipe their noses with their hands and then hand you a pencil that you dropped. They cough with mouths full of food and water before remembering to cover their coughs. I love children and our students, but they are not always the best at health mitigation. This school year was the first year that I or any of my colleagues did not catch debilitating winter colds. And that is because masks work at helping our little people keep their germs to themselves. I only heard a student complain about masks.
Thank you, Ms. Everett. I'm sorry.
I will submit the rest in writing tonight.
Thank you. That would be great. Appreciate it. Our next speaker this evening is Ms. Sarah Jenke.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Dr. Sarah Jenke. I am emailed the board previously with the information I'm sharing tonight, but also want to take the opportunity to speak publicly given the very vocal anti-mask sentiment that the board has faced. I'm a mom to Ainsley, who will be a freshman at Shawnee Mission East next year, and Crosby, who will be a kindergartner at Tomahawk. In full disclosure, a few things. I have a doctorate in psychology, but I'm also a fellow with the American College of Epidemiology. I currently have $1 million worth of funding from the Department of Homeland Security to study COVID and its impact on first responders. I am unapologetically driven by the empirical literature on COVID and its mitigation. I should also share that my son Crosby, who's going into kindergarten, has Down syndrome, so I have a biased and very vested interest in this topic. When other parents note that very few kids will get seriously sick from COVID as an argument against not doing everything we can to avoid the spread of the disease, Crosby is who they are talking about. He is one of the lucky few who was at high risk of serious disease and long-term consequences due to being immunocompromised. To summarize the literature that I shared via email on masks, we now know that masks are safe to wear. We also know that they are effective in decreasing disease spread and mitigating risk. We now have evidence to support that school openings can be done safely but require thoughtful mitigation. We also know openings are not without risk of increased spread. In a study of the opening of Texas schools in the fall of 2020, 800 excess deaths were associated with school openings in the first 2 months. I should share that this is not pediatric deaths, but deaths that were traced back to spread that happened within the school. The B117 variant that's out of the UK and the B16172 variant that's out of India are now spreading rapidly in the US, primarily among unvaccinated individuals. These are more transmissible and even in children, which is different than the original. It's thought to be due to the ACE2 receptors and the fact that initially they were not, the initial variants did not accept those, and now they do. Given the exponentially increasing spread of COVID that is occurring due to these new variants, our children will be at higher risk as they return to school. It has been stated at school board meetings previously that there is a significant concern that masks are psychologically harmful to children. Actually, research on mask mandates have found that they decrease stigma, increase other mitigation strategies, and increase compliance. When I say the literature does not find a negative psychological impact on children, that's on average. That does not mean they cannot be harmful. For parents who choose to present this issue as a negative or punitive rule, rather than an opportunity for community resilience, can and may be doing harm to their children. But that's true of the way we talk to our children about any rule or regulation. I'm sharing these facts and perceptions on behalf of nearly 200 who have signed their agreement with both my read and interpretation of the literature, as well as my appreciation, our appreciation of the district board, teachers, and staff and their Herculean efforts to navigate these challenging times. I brought a copy of those names and signatures for your review. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could just give that to Terry, it'd be appreciated. Thank you, Dr. Jenke. Our next speaker is Ms. Debbie Dittmer.
Hi, good evening. I am Debbie Detmer of Shawnee. I'm a grandmother of 8. And I seem to notice that, Heather, you seem to be leading the charge to keep these masks on and coerce the experimental drugs on the our children. You spoke at the Johnson County Commissioners meeting on September 17th in 20. In public comment, you stated you represented schools in an entire capacity, requesting to continue the wearing of the mask indoors. You stated that you collectively represented over 100,000 public school students in the county. You presented the board with a letter signed by 6 Johnson County school superintendents and 6 board presidents. I'm requesting all emails of any communication that took place between all 6 superintendents and 6 board presidents for the 2 months prior to your plea of September 17th. Please email them to me or publish them on YouTube. The Shawnee Mission School District Board meeting on the 17th, as stated by Channel 4, you personally called on the non-parental pro-maskers to show up and asked them to call Channel 4, 5, 9, and 41 to cover the pro-mask rally. The meeting on May 17th was videoed and shown on YouTube. YouTube is one of the medias that censors free speech. They only allowed their agenda to be communicated. Someone complained of this miscommunication. Were you, Heather Osley, involved in this complaint, or did you make a call requesting this action? I am asking for all communications of emails from the Shawnee Mission School District Board members and this facility that took place with YouTube, especially with Elena Hernandez, from May 17th through today. Please email that to me or post it on YouTube. I'm also asking you to stop using YouTube as the media source for all future Shawnee Mission School Board meetings. I am requesting the entirety of all meetings to be seen on the Shawnee Mission District webpage, including the May 17th meeting. Please use a non-biased media source like Rumble. After you cut the comment section out of the video on YouTube on May 17th meeting, you shared the comment portion with the Kansas City Star, continuing to push your agenda and masking our children and trying to silence us. If you ask a child to literally do anything that has even a 0.0001% chance of bringing him harm in order to protect you, then I hate to break it to you, but you are the selfish one.
Our next speaker this evening is Ms. Heather Edvinson.
Good afternoon. My name is Heather Edvinson, and I live in Overland Park. I'm here this afternoon to thank you for the work and your continued commitment for protecting our kids and our educators in the midst of this global pandemic. I'm grateful that you are following the CDC guidance for in-person education in our schools, and I urge you to continue that commitment. I'm a chemist, and when I work in the lab, I use multiple layers of safety precautions. So that means I'm wearing gloves and goggles, and I'm using the smallest amount of hazardous materials as possible, and I have access to an eye wash station. And in the lab, I'm using those multiple layers of precautions to keep the risk small. Those safety procedures don't stop me from doing research or setting up educational demos for students. They allow me to do those things well and with less risk. Similarly, the best public health guidance, including the CDC's guidance specifically for schools, emphasizes layers of precaution for COVID. Those layers include masks and distancing where possible, doing things outside when possible, and getting vaccinated. Following the guidance for layers of COVID precautions doesn't stop our amazing educators from teaching our students well. Layers of precautions allow our students to learn well and with less risk. For adults and teenagers, vaccines are adding another layer of safety, and that's amazing. But not all of our students have access to the vaccine yet. We owe it to our students to continue to provide them with layers of safety in their in-person learning environment. Our medically fragile children and kids who are vulnerable in multiple ways especially deserve our care and protection. Right now, CDC and other public health experts tell us that that means masking for everyone in the schools and distancing where possible. As vaccines become available for all our students, the need for those additional layers of precaution will probably decrease, and that's great, but we're not there yet. As you have done, as they have done throughout this pandemic, the CDC will continue to update that guidance for schools based on the science. Please continue to follow that CDC guidance, and right now that means continuing to mask for everyone in the schools and to distance as much as possible. Thanks for your time.
Our next speaker is Mr. Scott Bozarth.
Good evening. It's nice to see all your faces. This board's philosophy of education on your website, it states all students need to understand their individual rights, that responsibilities accompany those rights, and the heritage that assures those rights and responsibilities. That's my philosophy too. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I keep coming back. So stew on that as I go over these 2 points. The first thing I want to address is the May 17th board meeting and the YouTube issue. Public discourse is crucial, and it's a crucial aspect of these meetings. Censoring or removing public discourse from board meetings creates propaganda. It is imperative this district chooses a free speech platform for its public meetings. It is a relatively low cost considering the budget. These meetings must stay intact. Every citizen that spoke on May 17th had legitimate evidence backing their claim. It is imperative that their voice not be separated from the people that make the decisions. I'm not beholden to YouTube, and I do have legitimate evidence indicating masks are inefficient at preventing the spread of COVID and that they can indeed cause harm. And sorry, it's not information. Vaccines are experimental. These are brand new. We have no data to go on. My view is as important to the conversation and policy as all of your views, and whatever evidence you have to support that. We should be on the same side of this YouTube situation. I mean, for real, you guys should take a stand against YouTube. I mean, you're a school and you're going to let them censor you and agree with it? That's irrational. The second thing I want to talk about is your reopening plan. Teaching my kids the responsibility of their rights is showing them that they're going to need to reclaim their rights and exert them in the face of strong opposition one day. If I choose to send my child back to this district, I will exert her rights. The reopening plan will not require my child to wear a mask. It will not require my child to get a COVID-19 vaccine. And my child will not be identified, segregated, pressured, or ridiculed based on this mask or vaccine status. I do have a rich understanding of the heritage and responsibilities of our individual rights. Do you guys? Please recognize these rights and make the right decision. And honestly, I'm going to address all you guys. I don't care about the spread of a vaccine or the spread of the virus. I don't care that there's emergency declarations. I have rights.
Sir, you need to address
and
the
I will
board.
assert my rights.
And your time is up. Our next speaker is Ms. Wanda Vaughn.
Overrides our rights. None.
It's good to see you in person, Wanda.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Fulton and President and members of the board. I am Wanda Vaughn. I live in Mission, and I've had a long history with this district. My children started at Rushton Elementary and progressed through North. Both have jobs with health insurance because they were able to go to college and get good jobs. That's because they were in this district. I worked for the district myself for 18 years. My daughter currently works for the district, and both my grandkids attended preschool in this district. I have stayed engaged with this schools. I do want to take this opportunity to really express my gratitude to all of you, because I don't know how you take this abuse. I am amazed. You have definitely earned my respect. Dr. Fulton, I was truly impressed by your leadership in many areas, but the two that I really want to talk to you about are diversity and using data. Instituting data-driven decisions has greatly improved the ability to evaluate progress or lack thereof, and I really appreciate that. Board members, I cannot begin to be amazed at your fortitude and courage throughout these last several years. Seriously, I appreciate your commitment to keeping the staff and children in this district safe despite intense opposition and pressure. I really have to tell you, I'm impressed because you do all of this with the privilege of no pay. Please accept my heartfelt appreciation. I don't have any data. I am just telling you how I feel, and I am truly amazed that you continue to do this and thankful. Thank you. And that you use data to make your informed decisions. Thank you.
Where's the data?
Thank you. That concludes our public comment section for this evening. The board meeting will resume at 6 p.m.
Where's the data? That's
Okay, it's 6 o'clock. We are back, and I will turn it over to Dr. Fulton for item 2.2, the superintendent report.
Okay, thank you. Well, great to see everybody tonight. Thank you for coming out. We're going to start off with our 2021 Shooting Stars. We had multiple members of the Shawnee Mission class of 2021 who were recognized this spring for their artistic excellence. The Shooting Stars program honors graduating senior artists and art educators for their creative accomplishments with scholarships, awards, and honorariums. Shawnee Mission had students honored in the areas of literature and performing and visual arts. And we're going to include a link in the recap to a list of all these honorees, and we congratulate them on their artistic achievements. Shawnee Mission scholastic journalism is in the national spotlight. The National Scholastic Press Association, in celebration of its 100th anniversary, recognized the top 100 publications honored with a pacemaker during the last century. The pacemaker is a top prize of scholarship journalism. And we're so proud to see multiple Shawnee Mission publications at the top of the list. The Shawnee Mission Northwest Lyre Yearbook was number one in the rankings, in recognition of having earned 23 pacemakers and 3 pacemaker finalist honors. The Shawnee Mission North Yearbook earned 4th place, and the Shawnee Mission East Yearbook earned 9th place. The Shawnee Mission East newspaper, magazine, and online publication, and the Shawnee Mission Northwest newspaper, news magazine, were also recognized among the top 100 publications. As we mentioned previously, Riley Atkinson, a 2021 graduate of Shawnee Mission East, was named Journalism Education Association National Journalist of the Year. So congratulations to all the Shawnee Mission student journalists and their educators for these incredible recognitions. Marie Hooker, a 6th grade teacher at Highlands Elementary, is the 2021 Kansas PTA Outstanding Educator of the Year, as named by the Kansas PTA. She was selected for the honor because of her numerous accomplishments in education, her tenacity and respect for students, and her hard work and dedication on behalf of children. Kansas PTA recognizes an outstanding educator each year at the annual state PTA convention. And she was nominated by Highlands parent Jen Davis, who describes her as a consistent force of positivity and inspiration in the classroom. So congratulations. Chris Petrella, who is a trumpet player and incoming junior at Shawnee Mission South High School, won the high school solo division of the 2021 National Trumpet Competition. Now, the National Trumpet Competition is considered the premier competition event for trumpet players in the United States. Shawnee Mission South Band Director Steve Adams shared that Petrella was successful because of his incredible technical control and maturity in his musicality. This national award winner began playing trumpet in Shawnee Mission in the 5th grade, and we're very proud of all that he's accomplished, so congratulations to him. Isha Bosar, an 8th grade graduate from Indian Hills Middle School, has advanced to the quarterfinal round of the Scripps National Spelling Bee. Quarterfinals begin Tuesday, June 15th, with a focus on word meanings, engaging competitors from across the country. Bosar was a county champion and a state champion and advanced through a preliminary round in the national competition to reach this level. We will all, of course, be cheering for her as she demonstrates her word mastery in a national spelling bee, so congratulations. Well, a couple of weeks ago, many of us gathered on the construction site at the future home of Westwood View Elementary School for a groundbreaking ceremony. Students performed songs and took a shovel to the construction site, drawing the applause of educators, family, and community members who attended. Westwood View is being rebuilt as part of the $264 million bond referendum approved by voters this year. Westwood View is among 5 elementary school buildings that will be rebuilt as part of this bond. Construction will take place next at John Deemer Elementary, followed by Pawnee Elementary. So we're very excited about the progress that we're seeing. As we've shared at previous meetings, this will be a busy summer for construction in Shawnee Mission. In the next few weeks, weight room additions and restroom renovations will take place at Shawnee Mission North. Shawnee Mission Northwest restrooms and common areas will be remodeled. Indian Woods will undergo a restroom remodel and a 3-story addition. We'll also have multiple buildings receiving heating, ventilation, and air conditioning updates, playground replacements, and carpet and tile, floor tile upgrades. So we're really grateful for our entire SMSD community for supporting our students assessed the bond approval. It is absolutely essential to keeping our SMSD schools strong. Over the last few days, a group of exceptional high school students have been developing their leadership skills at the CAA. Leadership Shawnee Mission is a prestigious invitation-only summer leadership development program offered by the Shawnee Mission Education Foundation for incoming juniors and seniors. It combines career mentorship experience with classroom curriculum focused on leadership skills such as conflict resolution, communication, responsibility, and trust. These students have been hard at work learning these skills with partners from the Tucker Leadership Lab from William Jewell College. They also have worked with professional mentors from throughout the Kansas City community to strengthen their leadership skills. So we want to thank everyone who's made this opportunity possible for our students. It's a great program. Well, this is our first board meeting following the conclusion of the 21-22 or the 2021 school year. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We congratulate our students and all of our educators on a job well done. And I know many of our schools held clap-outs, parades, and other ceremonies to honor students for all their academic accomplishments and all that they overcame this year. And I also want to say the parents were very patient with us as we had to set up what were, not ideal, but acceptable forms of congratulating our students. So thank you to the parents for their patience as we came up with alternative methods to celebrate. We also, as a district, were thrilled to host commencement ceremonies for nearly 2,000 high school students. Those ceremonies are now available to be watched online. Thank you to everyone who made this school year possible. It was a challenging time, but everyone worked hard to do the very best for our students, and we're proud of everybody. Thank you. The learning continues this summer. We have students engaging in summer music, summer academy, and next week, summer enrichment begins for students in pre-K through 7th grade. Summer enrichment features classes allowing students to explore areas of interest including art, music, technology, science, and nature, sports, and more. Incoming 6th and 7th graders are able to attend signature program courses here at the Center for Academic Achievement, which is an exciting opportunity for them. Enrollment's open, and we'll include a link in the recap for those who are interested. And then finally, educators are also already getting ready for next year. Soon after the school year concluded, educators attended the Impact Institute, featuring a variety of professional development opportunities. Some also engaged in behavior intervention support teams, that's also known as BIST training. These sessions gave educators a chance to connect, reflect on the previous year, and set goals for the year that is to come. And we want to thank everyone who coordinated these learning opportunities and everyone who's taking time to strengthen their skills this summer. There's already a lot of work going on to get ready for the 21-22 school year, and we appreciate all the work that folks are engaged in. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Fulton. The next item on our agenda is a strategic plan update, so I'll turn it over to you and the team to provide us with that update.
And I'm going to immediately turn it right over to Dr. Hubbard, who will be leading up this presentation.
Thank you. I'm super excited to talk about the strategic plan. We've done amazing work this year as we finish year 2, and we have some progress to share with you. I want to start by thanking Dr. Fulton for your vision around this plan and really engaging the community and the stakeholders. I think you're going to see with this year 2 update the amazing amount of time and effort and work that people have put into seeing the strategic plan really come to life. So we're excited about that. And just thanking all of those who have served and continue to serve on committees to make this plan again come alive. We're not yet where we want to be, but we're going to continue working through that. And while there were some minor adjustments with COVID, we really feel like the focus was maintained on the mission and the objectives of the strategic plan and really specific action steps. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as Dr. Neal starts, but we are planning to hit the ground running in August, and we'll be looking for additional volunteers to recruit and assemble necessary committees for the work to come in year 3. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Neal.
Members of the board, Dr. Fulton, it's my pleasure to be able to bring to you the update. Thank you, Dr. Hubbard, for the introduction. I look forward to bringing you updates, regular updates throughout the year to highlight the exciting work that's going on. I have some colleagues that have joined me tonight, and they'll be available should you have some specific questions at the end around some of the strategies. But we're going to walk through tonight the way that I've structured the update. We're going to talk about some celebrations, work that was completed this year, and then do a little look ahead so that we can all kind of have our attention focused on what we're going to be looking for in the coming school year. And Dr. Hubbard did a nice job of really talking a little bit about this year. I think we can all agree it was an unusual year. Is probably an understatement. And so everybody that was helping to facilitate the strategic plan did a nice job of really looking and anticipating where did we need to sort of just kind of put a little light pressure on the brake, but then there was a lot of work that continued. And so with some minor adjustments, we really feel like we're going to be able to maintain the timeline and make those necessary adjustments within the calendar that's been set forward. So if you would advance, I always, I kind of start along with everybody else. You can go ahead and forward beyond that. With the mission, of course, as a great reminder around why we're doing the work. It was there was a lot of thought that went into setting that up, and that's really sort of our guide as we do this work around the 3 key objectives that we had adopted this in 2019, and really ensuring that every student will achieve academic success through that challenging, personalized learning plan, developing that personal resilience while mastering those essential competencies that they will need to be able to have college and career readiness, and then developing those interpersonal skills to be engaged, empathetic members of the local and global community. And so those objectives are accomplished through the work of the 5 strategies. And that's how we're going to walk through this evening the update. So if you could advance to strategy 1. Strategy 1, as you can see, really focuses on teaching and learning. So really reimagining teaching and learning so that we're sure that we can guarantee or ensure those relevant opportunities for personalized learning experiences. And there were several celebrations, some work that's been done. I'm going to give just a little hint of a preview around some of the real-world learning that's been occurring through that Kaufman project that we've been a part of. Some of the things that are nearing completion are the development of a definition of personalized learning. Along with that, development of the portrait of a graduate as it relates specifically to Shawnee Mission, and then creating a framework that will include the specific intentional feedback loop that we've agreed is really important as part of that process around supporting that personalized learning. Those items are near completion, and they will be coming back to you with greater detail in a report that will come to you in August at a board meeting. And Dr. Fleury will be here to support that presentation. So we'll look forward to seeing more detail on that. Again, we also accomplished the hiring of that business to education program officer, and that's been a great partnership. We achieved that through a partnership with the Shawnee Mission Education Foundation, and Laura Harsh is filling that role. And that particular role is around nurturing relationships that exist already, but really building some additional relationships within our community to support that personalized learning and specifically around the real world learning components. And so those are some things that have been achieved this year. Also, we're hiring an additional counselor at each high school, and their intentional focus, again, will be around that real world learning and connecting students with opportunities in their schools. The support of strategic initiatives related to the academic and interpersonal success, those did continue through that remote connectivity that we all experienced this year. Our curriculum cadres continued to meet regularly, and they were focused on continuing that work forward around identifying priority standards, those creation of the proficiency scales, developing common assessments. And so as we look ahead to next year, 2021-22, teams will begin to further that implementation, and will be, as Dr. Hubbard said, in August, there'll be a call out, not just for this strategy, but across all the strategies to engage additional volunteers to step forward to be part of those committees. And so in this strategy, they'll be looking at furthering the work around research-based instructional strategies, but also that alignment of grading practices moving forward. We just finished, as you saw earlier, the Impact Institute earlier this summer, and a component of the Real World Learning Project was represented there around some professional development for cross-curricular teams at the high school to engage in looking at micro schools and getting more information about how those may provide a different approach to that personalized learning within our high schools. We already talked about in August, you're going to hear more. And then, and part of that will be the reveal of that definition around personalized learning and what that feedback loop, what they've put together. So I think that shall be an exciting thing to look forward to in August. Moving on to Strategy 2. Strategy 2 is focused all around culture. So, and when we say culture, it's again that looking for ways that we can create that unified, equitable, and inclusive culture across all elements of our district. So this particular strategy had celebrations. While we had to, this is an example where we had to make some adjustments in terms of our overall Corwin Deep Equity training because we had to shift some of that professional learning to some other important things that we weren't necessarily anticipating, but with the pandemic, we needed to do that. And so while we will adjust that and have to move those forward a bit, we were able to accomplish continuing that work by having 25 equity practitioners complete their certification through that Corwin program. So in the future, as we look ahead with regard to those practitioners, they will transition to serving as sort of lead supports and leading that work in their buildings. And so that's a great celebration there. The district was also accepted into the Kansas City Equity in Schools program. That's, again, a program that's being sponsored through the Kauffman Foundation. It's a 12-month cohort, and it provides an opportunity to engage with metro area school districts, small, medium, and large, in some great conversation with other practitioners who are also working in their districts around this important issue of diversity, equity, inclusion. And so that's something that started in January, and so it's a 12-month cohort, will continue into this coming school year. And a component of that is there's an audit tool that looks at different elements, very similar, say, to things like when we do program evaluation presentations to you, something similar, but really focusing in around that diversity, equity, inclusion. We also, in the more of the HR and recruitment element, developed and implemented the SMSD recruit program, where we added 25 additional recruiters to the recruitment team. So we're able to go broader and deeper with our recruitment. And those individuals include teachers, counselors, administrators, and social workers. So really broadening that team to be able to go out, fan out, and provide maybe a greater opportunity to engage a more diverse candidate pool. And so while we had to do a lot of that remotely this year, and that's how recruitment fairs were, we look forward to continuing that. Dr. Schumacher, this coming year, hopefully in person, we'll be able to do that. So, and that again, they continued in that remote setting, going out to some of those different areas geographically of the United States, some historical Black colleges and universities to capture a more diverse candidate pool. We were able to continue that, but we look forward to deepening that in the coming year and looking forward to the future. Another element that we were able to achieve this year, at the beginning of the year, you know, we have our mandatory trainings. There was a component developed specifically around diversity, equity, inclusion, and that started as a component of that annual training for all staff, and that was implemented this year. And then during the spring, I believe a superintendent's advisory group around this issue that included high school students, teachers, parents, community, and organization members was formed and met beginning this spring, and that work will continue as well. Okay. As we look ahead, some of the things in this strategy, we look forward to gathering. One of the elements in there was around gathering some data specific to the diversity of our staff members. That data we anticipate being able to be placed on the HR webpage. So again, to feature how broad and how diverse our staff is, and continuing that as a part of telling our story and hopefully recruiting a broader pool of candidates as well. We've begun the discussion around a teacher cadet program, a grow your own program, teacher education program. Looking ahead, we hope to be able to dive a little deeper into that and make some headway on that, as well as exploring partnerships around a possible paraprofessional to master's program as an exciting opportunity, hopefully, to encourage and to build our staff in that way. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Panorama, which gathers up some of that social emotional data, will be in its third year of utilization in the coming year, and so we'll continue to gather that data as a component of looking at how we're doing and providing that feedback. Strategy 3 focuses on quality educators, so creating that climate to really cultivate our educators so that they can flourish in their profession and in the pursuit of our mission. A big celebration for us in this area. We were able to hire a director of professional learning. So Dr. Brittany Gonzer has joined us and has already been doing a lot of groundwork. So we'll be excited to have her be a part of the team and to lead some of this work across all the strategies, because many of our strategies include a professional development component. So that was an important celebration this year. And in relation to our work environment, in those strategies, with the passage of the bond initiative, the district was able to proceed successfully by implementing that first phase of moving our secondary teachers to teaching 5 out of 7 classes. So that was a celebration this year. And then a subcommittee met this year and will continue to discuss ways to find some of that protected collaboration time for elementary and middle school teachers. High schools have that late start, but elementary and middle school, we're still looking at that as an area that was identified as an important component, and we'll continue to look at if there are ways to create that protected time for them. Looking ahead, while there was no formal work done this year on the class size issue, with those ESSER funds, we were able to realize a class size reduction at the elementary level. And so those class sizes will be reduced to 22 for K through 2 and 25 for grades 3 through 6. And we'll continue to look at ways of continuing that beyond. As you know, the ESSER funds will sunset. We have those for 3 years, and so we'll continue those conversations as part of the strategic plan around looking for ways to continue to address class size. And then a survey was developed and sent to all staff just before spring break this year. It really looked at what people know about our resources around mental health and wellness supports. And so that survey was sent out to all staff. Those results are being evaluated and will be submitted to the district executive leadership team, and then looking at recommendations for how can we, different things. How can we better educate and share information with all of our team members around what supports are available? And so that information will be worked on in the coming year. Strategy 4 is focused on systems, so really designing that system-wide support of our mission and beliefs. The lion's share of the celebrations this year in this strategy are around the creation of an RTI, or a response to intervention. I think it says Guiding Students to Success Handbook, I think is the actual title. And that really represents a lot of work, almost I think a year and a half to 2 years worth of work of a committee of nearly 50 people. It was those members were parents, community members, teachers, classified administrators. A very broad committee worked on this and put a lot of effort into really defining each tier of that response to intervention. It's a handbook that provides a common system for implementation of that response to intervention in Shawnee Mission, as well as a definition for each of those tiers. So response to intervention really looks at sort of identifying students who are succeeding with the core curriculum, but then students that have gaps and need more of those intentional interventions. They may be small groups. They may need some additional supports in introducing the information in a different way, because that initial core implementation or introduction of the content was not enough for them. They need to look at it differently. And then if those interventions aren't enough, then a third tier of even more individualized interventions to see if the students can progress. And so this handbook is intended to be a living document that can have resources added to it, but I hope you have an opportunity to take a look at it, because it represents a lot of really great integrated work that really will be a great resource. And in the coming year, they'll be introducing that. An introduction to administrators was made of that handbook, and we'll be furthering that training and sharing of that information broadly across the staff so that they have that access to that. And it really, it has a curated district toolkit along with some building responsibilities. So a lot of work went into that, and it ties in the benchmark assessments, progress monitoring tools, all of that. And so that's a big celebration for this particular strategy for this year. And then looking ahead, we talked about the training that'll happen with that, but also we've identified the Unified Performance Matters will be the monitoring tool for that. And so because we want to be able to access the student information data to see how that's working and how students are progressing year to year. And so we'll be implementing that, and of course training folks on how to use that this coming year. And then strategy number 5 focuses on facilities, having those state-of-the-art facilities that really support the mission and the instruction and what's happening to help students succeed. And so we talked a little bit about that in the superintendent's report, so I'll kind of shorten mine up. But a precursor to the ability for us to really do that work was the passage by you of the board policy that sets forth around the operating fund balance and talks about maintaining those budgets to ensure that we can have those enhancements of facilities while also providing our opportunities for increased achievement. So that was a celebration this year. With the pandemic and different things, certainly there was increased light and focus around air quality enhancements, and so we moved all of our schools to MERV 11 or MERV 13 where possible, so that and we established a minimum outdoor airflow when conditions allow. So those were things that occurred and happened this year. And then we got started on the great projects of the bond referendum with the Westwood View, the demolition of the intercom building, and the groundbreaking complete. And so we'll be looking ahead this next year to the groundbreaking for John Deemer after the start of school. The groundbreaking for Pawnee, I think, looks like it will be more likely in March of 2022. So that'll be great. And then this summer, I think there are more than $100 million in projects underway, which is actually mind-blowing if you think about that. And so Dr. Fulton touched on what several of those renovation projects are. And then, of course, our facility audits through Train and Children's Mercy will continue as well. And so I would conclude by just reiterating what Dr. Hubbard said. There are a number of people that are engaged in this work, and the great facilitators who have helped me to catch up on what that is so I can bring you the update. Dr. Fleury, Dr. Ziegler, Dr. Schumacher, who are here this evening, but we also have a number of folks in the curriculum department that have led this work. Dr. Dennis, David Smith in communications, Kim Barney, Krista Carson, Christopher Villarreal, Kristen Zook, Jeremy Higgins, and Tyrone Bates and John McKinney, and then, of course, Tyler Clubb. So they deserve recognition and a highlight for their hard work, and we are excited about what's happening, and we look forward to bringing you updates throughout the year. And so we now stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, and thank you for the report as well. It was very detailed. I figure we'll go around in a circle. Ms. Hembry, will you get us started with your questions?
Sure.
Or question, and then we'll...
Yeah, happy to.
Then.
My question was about the Equity in Schools cohort, that I'm really excited that we're participating in that. I'm reflecting on, I've heard Dr. Fulton say that we need to make sure equity is not any one person's job. So I'm curious to know who's participating on that on behalf of the district, and who else, how we're bringing information back from what we're learning.
Dr. Ziegler?
So our team at the district level includes elementary principal, a middle school representative, a principal, and a high school principal, as well as representatives from our curriculum instruction team and our student and family services team. So multiple aspects of the district. One of the things that we have partnered well on this year and continuing to improve is the work that happens in student and family services and the partnership with the building and the support that we give, but also curriculum instruction. So it's been a great piece. And I will tell you, one of the things as we reflected on the work so far, and we're only midway through the year-long process, we started in January. We've had, I think, 4 opportunities now to come together with Beloved Community, which is the facilitation group out of New Orleans that Kaufman has brought in to do this work. But the power in the work is for our team to get to meet, and it's all been via Zoom, but to go into breakout rooms with other member districts. And Dr. Neal shared that those are large, medium, small, but also private, parochial, and charter schools within our metro. And we get to hear what they're doing, and they get to hear from us. So that's really been the power of that experience, is to get together with other practitioners that also represent the same type of roles and responsibilities throughout school systems in our area.
Thank you.
Ms. Goodburn?
I appreciate the report, and I don't have any questions.
Thank you. I also do not have questions at this time. Dr. Sinclair?
I have a question about strategy 4 on the systems. And just thinking globally, the students who were identified for response to intervention, what's that overlap between what we think of in the broader kind of community as at-risk students? So you have that at-risk population of students, and then we have this evidence-based practice, RTI, as one way of responding to the needs of students who might be struggling academically or behaviorally. So is there a really strong overlap between who is kind of that at risk and? Okay. Okay.
And I think, too, if I can add, that it's, I think the nice thing about it is it sort of eliminates that wait to fail and really is a proactive approach to try to address and to intervene early so that students can overcome some of those things and that we can pivot and adjust our instructional models to meet their needs earlier.
I would also add that it would also be on the other end of the scale for kids that were not being challenged, and we need to push them to the next level. So it would be that.
Can I ask a follow-up? Yes. So how does it, can you speak a little bit more about how the performance matters, the Unify then connects that piece? Or is that August? Am I jumping ahead?
I can say a little bit. So Performance Matter, we've had for a couple of years. We have just recently decided that it is a tool that we already have, that people are familiar with, that allows us to progress monitor. I cannot get into the weeds about what that looks like. I can tell you that our team is very excited about what teachers would be able to see in regards to progress monitoring and really tracking, that's a really bad word, but really watching those kids progress through the system, right? And to see, to track the progress, to see if kids are making improvements, and if not, then we need to go back and start over, or if yes, then continuing what we're doing. So we could ask Dan to speak more specifically about that at a future time, but that's probably the extent of my knowledge in regards to Performance Matters.
I think it would be, having Dan come maybe after the start of the year sometime to talk about that would be good, because I know that they had made the decision that that's the platform, and they'll be developing the training and everything, so we could bring that back to you with more information.
So, and that might not be part. So part of my question is just that's really one of the tools to help manage the data, right? To provide.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. And provide that ongoing information about whether students are progressing. All right. Thank you. And great report. Very, very informative. Appreciate it.
Mr. Stratton?
My questions have been answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Reverend Guy?
I want to thank you for this report too, and it's especially exciting, having been on the Strategic Plan Steering Committee, to think back to when these were just words and ideas on a piece of paper, and now to see all the ways that you have implemented them, and I'm very excited about all the celebrations and all the ongoing work. I just had one quick question on Strategy 1, the celebrations. You said that we have additional counselors hired at each high school to focus on real-world learning. Are those positions paid for with ESSER funds? Is this something that will also potentially have to find other funding in a couple of years?
So one of those positions, so basically 20% of the pool is paid for out of the Kauffman Foundation grant. The other 4 are paid for out of ESSER funds, so we will have to think down the line strategically if this becomes successful, how we want to support that continued, those roles. Yeah.
Ms. Workman?
Yes, thank you. Very good report. My question is around the equity audit. I just kind of wanted to understand that a little bit more. What does that look like? What's the length of it? Will it be made public? Will the auditors seek student input? Could you speak to that a little more? Thanks.
Thank you so much for the question. So we've had a lot of conversation around that term audit. So the way Beloved Community comes at this work is the audit is actually a formative tool. So all of us that are engaged in this cohort process have used that same formative tool. Our district teams that are doing the work engaged in 4 to 5 hours to complete the actual tool. It was about 180 questions. A lot of those questions are asked in different ways, and it allows us to drill deeper into our work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the actual 180 questions we don't have access to. Those are in a different tool that they harvest and then provide back to us. So at the conclusion of our cohort work, we would be able to bring that information forward, maybe in a program evaluation as we do annually. But what I can share with you is where we have come on a 5-point scale across our work on diversity, equity, inclusion, the 3 key areas that they have provided us feedback. We are in the middle tier, as is the rest of the national average we fall. So we are in the emerging and developing areas in those key indicators, which I think for where we are in our work, it's pretty a good place to be. So we are staged to go into the expanding work, and we'll continue to be a part of the cohort and get the coaching through Beloved Community. But what's nice about the report is it layers down alongside the strategic plan goals that are already identified in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the work that we have begun as a district. So I would say that additional information will come as we complete the year.
Are we going around again, or? Go ahead, Ms. Embry.
I had just one brief question, sorry. And I really do appreciate the report, so thank you very much. I do know we have on the website a data dashboard for the strategic plan. How often is that updated? Like, what kind of updates should we expect on that?
I was actually going to share that in my closing to make sure that there is a timeline on the strategic plan page. I believe it's called Implementation Progress Timeline on that page. And we do that quarterly, and we did update it. It may already be. It's already up on the web, Dr. Neal. So, yeah, I was actually going to close with a kudos to Dr. Neal. She will be taking my role as the facilitator of the strategic plan. And in a very short time, in the transition phase here, I said, Dr. Neal, I always say it's a learning opportunity, and people laugh at me, but it was a great learning opportunity for Dr. Neal, and she took it and ran with it, and obviously has done an amazing job. The two of us met with each of the strategy teams, and we updated that timeline. We do that as a team. We bring those working teams in and say, tell us where you are, and we progress monitor that, so that is updated, and we do that quarterly. Thank you, Dr. Neal.
Thank you. Okay, well, was that the conclusion? Great. Thank you very much. Of course, Dr. Fulton.
I just want to thank the team that put this report together. Thank you very much for your great work. Here you go back to the formation of this plan. There were lots of people involved. Dr. Hubbard and Mr. Smith were 2 key facilitators in helping the entire strategic planning process really go off without a hitch. They did a wonderful job of facilitating the various groups. But I also want to thank you as a board. A strategic plan is alive and well when it is comfortable and it's seamless. We've integrated the strategic plan into the life of our district, and it absolutely does influence the decisions that we make. It guides us in making decisions. So I just want to thank you as a board for all the work that you've done. And I know as Dr. Hubbard steps in the superintendent role, she's going to do an absolutely fantastic job, as will you as a board, continuing the plan. We talked when we first developed this that a really well-written strategic plan transcends any one individual. This plan definitely fits that bill. So thanks for all your great work.
Thank you, everyone. The next item on our agenda is 3.2, which is a discussion around board policy BCBI, public participation. And I am going to kick it over to Dr. Fulton for some technical information from him and Dr. Smith.
Okay, and I may turn, first of all, to Ms. Goodburn for a little overview, and then I'll pick it up from there.
Absolutely. So as you all know, BCBI is our policy about public participation, and we kind of started talking about this at our board retreat a few weeks ago. Actually, we were talking about a different subject, about the agenda, and it came up that in this year of COVID, we've started our meetings at 5:30, and in part to have public participation between about 5:30 and 6 because of the fact that we could only have limited amount of people in the room at a time. And so then at 6 o'clock, it would kind of switch over, and all the public comment folks would usually leave, and then our own staff members would come in that have to present for the regular meeting. And we talked about moving we talked about the desire to potentially start the meeting, or start a meeting of public participation from 5:30 to 6 and keep it that way. And so BCBI was brought back to us then at the, at our policy review committee. So we started looking at it then. And subsequently, and kind of layered on top of it, the discussion about YouTube and what happened at our, I think it was May 17th meeting. And so then I'm going to throw it over to Dr. Fulton and his team to kind of talk about the different aspects and what has happened with that. So go ahead.
Yeah, great, thank you. And so kind of with that handoff, you know, when we took the direction that was provided, and we began to work on some draft policy language, which was discussed at the Policy Review Committee. And we really had two goals. One was, of course, was to update the policy language with the current practice of providing 30 minutes for public comment. And the second was to provide a technical fix to a problem that we encountered recently with YouTube. So I'm going to address that technical fix in a few minutes. But first, I thought it might be helpful for David Smith, our Chief Communications Officer, to update you on what we've learned about YouTube's policies and the impact that it's having on our practice.
Good evening, Board. I want to begin just sort of taking you back to when we started broadcasting. We've done it for about 10 years, and that's important because part of what we have is 10 years of archive currently on YouTube of our video broadcasting, but also of virtually everything that we share via video. That includes, obviously, graduations and our foundation breakfasts and the all-star videos that we do to celebrate staff, as well as videos that we do to talk about the different programs that we do here at the district, to share information about celebrations, athletic events, and all those things. I tried several times to count how many videos. You know how you keep loading more and more, and I kept falling asleep, and I couldn't get to the end of it. So we have a lot of content. And that really was one of the things that as we began to think about broadcasting live, that was really at the top of our list. We wanted to be able to obviously broadcast live and archive, and that was important. We needed to have storage capacity. We wanted to make sure there was broad viewership so that anybody, anywhere, regardless of device or means of access, could access it. But importantly, we wanted to make sure that it was easy. You didn't have to join a platform in order to view it. You could just click a link, go to the link, and see it. And that link could be shared easily. Two other points. One was that it was very important for legal and reasons of openness, diversity, and inclusion that the platform allowed for closed captioning. And it was certainly a plus that it was able to, the platform would be able to do it automatically. And then finally, cost. And YouTube has no cost for broadcasting live. And I think, and I've had conversations with colleagues really across the country in terms of what others are doing, and the vast majority, including the other 5 districts here in Johnson County, use YouTube as their platform. And for all of the reasons. It's the one that fits. And I think, honestly, their model doesn't depend on making money from broadcasting live. That's not their financial model. The others that do live broadcasting, their financial model depends on making money from it. So I think that puts YouTube into kind of a separate category. There are other things about YouTube and that we think are helpful and would want to make sure we had access to. It's searchable. It has professional quality of videos that it allows for broadcast. It doesn't require anything technically from us. We previously, when we first began, we did it ourselves, and we had a position devoted to both writing the code that allowed us to do it ourselves and to maintaining it. YouTube allowed us to eliminate that, and we appreciate, we've got many other things we can use our resources for. It allows for almost instantaneous ability to move from a live broadcast to being archived on the platform so that it's almost immediately available for anybody who wants to go back and watch it, including all of us. They do have community guidelines and standards. There are some other platforms that talk about being free speech platforms and claim not to have guidelines, but as I'm sure all of you can imagine, there would be risk associated with that. They do the automatic captioning, and of course, it's a ubiquitous platform. Like I mentioned, the other districts in the county all use YouTube as well. We've begun the process of having conversations with some of the platforms. One that we had conversation with is Granicus, and they've got some costs for setup, some one-time fees, some hardware. They have an annual fee, and it's based on the amount of usage. And then they don't have a live or automatic version of closed captioning, so they would do it with a live human being. And so that really depends on how much broadcast you're doing, but we estimated it could be anywhere from $7,000 to $8,000 to $15,000 a year just for the closed captioning piece of it. We've made inquiries for Vimeo, for IBM's Watson Media, and a couple of others. So we're still working on that. We don't have solid information. So that's kind of where we are. YouTube has guidelines for medical information, misinformation, for hate speech, and they have a pretty complicated policy, but the first time it happens, you get a strike against you and they take it down, and after that, you lose growing amounts of access to being able to either post information, and ultimately you can be removed from the platform.
I might add too, originally we were talking about this briefly at the Policy Review Committee meeting. One of my concerns that I expressed was the impact it might have on instruction. But that is actually not impacted because they have a different account from the district account. Is that right, Mr. Smith?
Right. Each of our teachers, if you're going to be posting to YouTube, you'll have a YouTube account, and they're not connected to each other. There isn't an enterprise account for all of us like there are for some other things, so it wouldn't affect any staff member's ability to post.
And so I'll make a few more comments here, and then feel free to have a conversation on it. But because YouTube is an incredibly valuable tool for delivering content, and we're using it for a lot of content, it's really preferable to maintain its use from our perspective administratively. Here are some considerations for continued use of YouTube for board meetings. First, we've never had a content problem with YouTube for district communications outside of this recent event related to public comment, so that's good. We believe continuing the use of YouTube for communications outside of public comments a reasonable approach. So in order to reduce the risk of public comment impacting YouTube use, a workable solution is to separate public comment from the board meeting as a whole and have public comment be its own separate meeting, and that's what was suggested in the policy language that we discussed the other day. Now, if public comment continues in its present form as part of the board meeting and the meeting is broadcast, then we'd be well advised to move to a third-party vendor, which would, as Mr. Smith mentions, would require additional cost. That same logic, by the way, that is the use of a third-party vendor, would also hold true if public comment was its own meeting and it was broadcast. So you're kind of, you may or may not have to involve a third-party vendor depending on how you choose to, what you choose to broadcast and how you choose to organize the meetings. But that's the overview of the issue that we're facing, the policy discussion that we had the other that the Policy Review Committee had the other day, and I'll be happy to respond to any questions.
So before we get into questions, we have a second item on our agenda for the board manual update, item 3.3, and there's a two-part question in front of us this evening. The one is the more technical procedural question, which we're dealing with in 3.2. And then in 3.3 is like the procedure and practice of how we want to operate with regards to live streaming public comment. So the board policy it's silent on whether or not public comment is live streamed. It's just talking about like the framework for if it's a part of the meeting as a whole, or if we create two meetings, a meeting before that's strictly for public comment, which would allow for the full 30 minutes to be part of public comment. We wouldn't be doing agenda or pledge. And then the manual discussion, we can have that portion be with regards to whether or not, or if we want to put something in the manual about live streaming and a decision about third-party vendors or deciding to not live stream or however that works. So we can start with questions and we'll go in around. I'll start with Ms. Embry again and we can work our way around.
I want to just confirm, I mean, I'm on the policy review committee, so we already had some of this conversation, but I would just invite all of us as board members to be as crystal clear as we can about what the problem is we're trying to solve here. And from my perspective, the problem we're trying to solve is that we want to be sure that we can continue to broadcast as much of our deliberation as possible to our public, despite YouTube potentially flagging our account. So I think we're all kind of, your identification of the problem necessitates a different response. So I want to clarify that I think that's a worthwhile conversation for us to have. It's not necessarily a question, just sort of putting out there that our concept of what the problem is really matters for the solution that we're going to pursue. And I mean, the policy in front of us is a very technical fix to just update the policy to represent our current practice. It doesn't really address what I think is the underlying question of how much we broadcast and how much we're willing to pay to broadcast what we think is important. So not a question, just a statement.
Ms. Goodburn, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, because the policy, BCBI, it just is moving meeting, basically creating another meeting for public comment. The 30 minutes prior to the meeting, it doesn't say anything about broadcast, whether we broadcasted the meeting even. It doesn't state anywhere in our policies about our policy on broadcasting anything. So anyway.
Well, we don't have anything anywhere as far as I know.
No, there isn't.
It was just when the district moved into being technically able to broadcast, it started broadcasting.
But what I'm saying, if we like the fact that public comment, regardless of what state, if we broadcast it, we don't, if we like the fact that it's the 30 minutes prior to the meeting from 5 to 6, this is an easy fix to this policy. I guess it's the other conversation, trying to figure out, if we broadcast or we don't, based on information.
So I think the problem is if we get flagged again and it gets pulled, oh, that's handy. I won't do it now. We lose potential access to what's on YouTube currently, which is the ubiquitous platform for providing that service. And so, for example, when this instance happened, we had just had a budget presentation from Russ, and we were in the middle of finalizing negotiation discussions, and the budget presentation was removed, which is unfortunate for, getting access to that information. I think it's important that we look to making sure that the machinations of the board are viewable by the public. So anything that the board is doing, whether it be the sub-policies on finance and facilities or the sub-policy committee, I don't think we streamed those prior to COVID. And we don't have a policy on streaming those, but I think it is useful and informative to have access to that. Because I think it's useful and informative for people to see what the board is doing. And I think that's where I will rest with my thoughts for right now, and I'll move it over to Dr. Sinclair.
So I guess I'll join in, adding a couple of comments. So I think one of the lessons that came away from the global pandemic was that providing live streaming access to the work of the board increased access to a broader community. So that was an effective way of allowing folks in our community to understand the decisions that we were making. So that was a nice silver lining from the pandemic. Minor, but so that one of the takeaways is, do we want to continue live streaming the work of the board even if people can come? And so to me, one objective or defining the problem would be that, how do we want to continue to maintain that broad access to the work of the board through live streaming? And so we have a problem to solve because of the incident in the kind of May 17th meeting. So that kind of misuse of the public comment or misinformation around medical misinformation kind of jeopardized our ability to continue to provide that broader access. So Dr. Fulton and the work of the Policy Review Committee has provided one technical solve to reducing that threat to access, which would be to separate the two, the public comment from the board meeting. So that to me seems like a pretty straightforward solve to that problem. I think it's important to remember that a school board meeting or the work of the board is work that we conduct on behalf of the district, but it's not a meeting with the public, it's a meeting we hold in the public, but it is our work that needs to get done. And that public comment, if we think about that portion, is one of several modes that patrons can use to share information with the board or provide input. So there's multiple ways in which the public can participate, perhaps. This policy, BCBI, just really focuses on public comment, but people can send emails, they can join committees, or they can engage in surveys, they can talk to their principals. So there's lots of ways the public can participate in the work of the district in the strategic plan and convey information to the board. So I think that's important to remember. So I think discussing how we continue with the live stream of the work of the board, I think that's a separate conversation. And I think it bears some conversation about what constitutes the work of the board. And then if we can define that pretty clearly, then the second piece is, do we want to continue live streaming that, and what's the most effective way to do that? I think I'll stop there for now. Sorry to ramble on.
No, you're fine. Mr. Stratton.
I guess we're just going to go through a comment period, and I'll just add to it.
Framing your problem.
So first of all, I appreciate the policy committee that already had a conversation about it. So that was helpful. I was able to observe what took place there through notes and media reporting, and that was helpful for me to understand where the dialogue went. My first reaction is YouTube did not create this problem. What they did is they forced the hand of us to address what we haven't already addressed. It's forced us to have the next conversation. I think that's what we're having here. I'm a big guy about definitions, and so the first thing I dove into, so what is the definitions? And I kind of lumped them together. To me, public comment and public input is really a one-directional conversation or one-directional line of communication, whereas public discourse, public conversation, public dialogue is a two-way. And the way I look at, so that's the definition. For me, I went back in history as far as I can remember and know. Prior to the advances in technology, any local level government could be communicated with in a variety of ways. One was through letter. So you could send a letter to a public official, still being done today. You could then do a phone call, and there were plenty of those back in the day. Interestingly enough, that's changed now because a third advent came along, and that's email. And so that seems to be the quickest way for folks to communicate with us or to us. And in some cases, that's a one-way dialogue. In some ways, it's a two-way dialogue. If a board member wants to get follow-up information, they can from that person providing the input. But in those three examples, I guess there's also just one-on-one conversations. We kiddingly always call them the grocery store conversations because people bump into you in public. But In each of those examples, going back to phone calls, letters, emails, and conversations, none of those was there an obligation to then say, now we need to post that on the website or mail it back out to the community or put it out in some public venue for everyone to see a conversation or a piece of input that we received. And so that's the context of which I'm now looking at this conversation, saying, what's the obligation and what's part of, as one of the speakers said, public discourse. I think it's a public conversation. The discourse is when this board is doing what they're doing right here. And this is the part that I feel very comfortable that we move to broadcasting way out ahead of our peers, I think, within public government. I think when someone provides us input in the form of public conversation, whether it's what I just listed, I don't see the same obligation. So simply because of the technology of YouTube, that changed that dynamic. So those are my thoughts there. I guess I go back to our First Amendment obligations and anyone's rights there, and I've had a few questions about those over the years. And I would say that everyone's invited to come into this room and observe what we're doing. Anyone's welcome to come in here and personally broadcast it. We have rights of the media to come in here and set up cameras throughout and broadcast what's going on in this room. So no one's hindering the ability to observe what's taking place in this room. I don't feel it's the obligation of this district and the taxpayer dollars to provide the venue or the avenue or the equipment for which to amplify and propagate somebody else's messaging to this board. And I'll leave it at that.
Reverend Guy?
I've appreciated hearing from my colleagues on this. I think it is a thorny issue and one that technology has created for us. It can have good purposes and bad purposes. My thoughts went to the same place that Mr. Stratton's did, that there is so much communication from the public that I get that is handwritten letters and emails and phone calls and grocery store conversations, and I take all that in and weigh all of that as we're making decisions. So to me, there's really no difference between that input that I get and the input that I get from people speaking to us in person. But it is interesting that none of that other communication is made public. Although the person who sends the email or has the conversation in the grocery store is certainly free to post that on their own social media, if they want to say, here's the email I sent to the board members, because they want other people to see it too. That is certainly their right and their privilege to do that. But it's not upon us to get that communication out to the general public. So I think all of these things that have been said, the importance that our work is visible to the community and that they are able to easily access it. And I agree that YouTube, I think, is the easiest way for most people to access streaming. It just is. And so yes, I echo the things that have been said for all those reasons.
Ms. Borkman?
Yeah, thank you to my fellow board members. Yeah, there's several different issues I feel like in this conversation. I don't think that the policy that was brought, and I too am on the policy committee, I don't think that the policy that was brought before us really, I feel like it's kind of opaque and doesn't necessarily do a good job of really explaining the intent. And I think that it's interesting that we're putting all of our eggs in the YouTube basket because, we've talked about how on May 17th, our meeting was pulled from YouTube because of public comment. Well, what happens when and if there's a board member who makes a claim or says something and the meeting gets then pulled from YouTube? Or what if there's someone from, administration or something that makes a claim? And so we're putting all of our eggs in this YouTube basket. And, because of public comment, we want to ditch public comment because we're afraid our meetings are going to get pulled from YouTube. But I think we need to look bigger. I think we need to be concerned about, again, what happens if somebody in a board meeting makes a comment and we get pulled? So I feel like the fact that all of our eggs are in the YouTube basket is, you know, it's not the right, if the intent is for the public to watch a working meeting, then, and we run the risk, regardless if it's public comment or a board member or an administrator or someone speaking at a meeting, you know, I don't think that YouTube is the best platform for us. I think we really should look at a third-party platform, because anytime someone is speaking, you run the risk, right? Nobody here is controlled and has a script of what they're going to say. So again, I just think that YouTube, I mean, if this is all about YouTube and protecting our space on YouTube, I think we need to look at some other potential issues involved with that. Additionally, I just want to add that, you know, we teach our students to think critically, to look at an issue, and to really listen to both sides. And it's important for all of us to have access to all thoughts and views of individuals in our district. For example, that was important to teachers during negotiations. They needed and wanted the public to hear that perspective, to hear their perspective. They needed and wanted to be heard. It was important for our community to hear from Ben Barnes, the chief of the federally recognized Shawnee tribe, saying people are not mascots. I mean, if the issue is YouTube, we have an easy fix. We go to a third-party platform. Again, policy BCBI that came before our policy committee on the surface seems very benign, but there's a lot more to it than just, you know, do we separate public comment from the traditional agenda? I think the board and the district has made great strides in creating a more transparent environment, and pulling public comment away from the public, I think, sets us back. And this policy, in my mind, feels sneaky because really the intent of it is not really addressed. And that's to separate, you know, the meeting from, the public comment from the meeting, and not broadcast the public comment. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to be clear too, and I may not have adequately addressed this in my previous comments, but I do want to talk about intent, because administratively we put these together, as you know, we bring them to the committee. So the intent on our part was pretty simple. It was, we had this problem involving YouTube, and we were trying to find a technical solution to it, and we've identified really what the two options are. The options are either separate the meeting out, which the policy language that was proposed does that, or the other option is you leave public comment as part of the meeting as a whole. In either case, if you're going to broadcast public comment, you would have to have you would want to go to a third party. So if you're going to have public comment as part of the meeting as a whole, you'd want to use a third party for the board meetings, so that you're not potentially impacting all the other uses of YouTube that we have. Or you separate out into a different meeting, and then you use a third-party vendor to, if you're going to broadcast public comment, and that doesn't affect the meeting as a whole. So the intent, I know at least administratively, was simply to provide a technical solution to this new problem that we were experiencing on using YouTube. So I just want to be clear on that, because I certainly don't want to think that there's something other than that going on. For us, it's strictly a technical fix to a problem that we're trying to solve to keep YouTube as a platform viable for us.
Ms. Embry?
Oh, I would just echo some of Ms. Boardman's comments. I would note that while there are lots of ways for the community to interact with board members, I think we've seen time and time again that public comment remains a really important tool that our community uses in an ongoing way. They use it to hold the board accountable. The fact that that is broadcast allows a wider audience to see what kinds of conversations we're having. That means, you know, sometimes I have certainly heard things at public comment that I don't agree with, but I do not want to see us let a small group of people with some medical misinformation deprive our entire community of the opportunity of seeing what kind of comments are coming before this board. I think that's important. So I think I would love us to look into some sort of a third-party option that would allow us to continue to broadcast the board meeting and public comment in its entirety. That feels like the most open and transparent option that we could pursue.
Ms. Goodburn?
I just want to address one thing. I think Ms. Borgerman actually said ditch public comment. I don't know if I was, and I don't think that was ever the intent of myself or anything to ditch public comment. And I don't know if, oh, ditch it from broadcast. Okay, well, but anyway, I just wanted to point that out. But it is not statutorily required that we even provide a public comment at a meeting. I mean, this, as somebody said down here, it is the board's meeting in public, not a public meeting. But it's always been the intent of this board and the board members I've served with over the last 10 years to provide that public comment time to our public, so we do hear from a variety of voices, and they also can get a hold of us, you know, in the other ways that other people mentioned. But I just heard that, and maybe I just didn't get the rest of it. But anyway. So, and then the only thing I was going to say is I just don't think that it's a very wise decision to use public dollars to switch away from YouTube because it's free. And they provide all those different things that Mr. Smith was talking about. I don't think it's a very wise, you know, I can see maybe potentially if we decide to go ahead and broadcast public comment, to separate the meeting out and just do that one on that platform. That way it's not as expensive. It's still probably going to get pretty expensive, but continue to use YouTube for the regular meetings. I think that would be, I mean, the best use of our public dollars. I wouldn't be in agreement. I mean, we don't know exactly what the final figure will be, but I wouldn't be a big proponent of spending a whole lot of money on this, period.
So the movement to take public comment out of the meeting also formalizes the 30-minute window for public comment, because prior to COVID, we had public comment that went sometimes for a very extended period of time. We would be here until very late in the evening because the business of the meeting wouldn't start until the conclusion of public comment. And one of the things that COVID has given us is opportunities to see a lot of different things and how they work. For example, we've live streamed our subcommittees, and that's been useful, and that's something we didn't do before COVID. And one of the things we did was move to 5:30 to 6 so that we could maintain distancing requirements and still have the public comment period. So BCBI, as drafted right now, is still separate from the decision as to whether or not to live stream. The live streaming is not in any of our policy. It's not in any of our procedures. It's not in any of our, you know, written guidelines or practices for the board. And so that is part of why the board manual update is on the agenda at 3.3, because we have two things to decide, none of which is on any sort of first reading this evening. This is just discussion so that we can give guidance to the administrative team on what to bring to us in a couple of weeks. But I think the triggering part of this debate is about the live streaming issue and not necessarily about, okay, let's have a separate, let's do the 30 minutes for public comment. It's smooth, it provides, you know, opportunity for us to conduct business when we're fresh, we're engaging with the public, or the public is engaging with us. And then the second portion of the conversation under the board manual is what is the procedure? Because as it sits right now, without anything written in the manual, it's technically would be, I believe, the executive team's decision as to what to do with it. And so rather than it just being a decision that the executive team makes, it's a decision we'll make together in how we draft what we put in the board manual surrounding public comment. So I think if we can come to some sort of consensus or some sort of provide some sort of guidance on board policy BCBI after we finish this round to the admin team, then we can move on to the board manual update, because that's really the meat of the discussion for us on what our practice looks like moving forward. And I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Sinclair.
Okay. I'm going to go back to the idea of how are we framing the problem we're trying to solve. And so I would agree with Ms. Borgman. It's not all about YouTube. That's not probably a productive way to frame the problem. To me, it's about how do we continue to provide access to the work of the board to the broader community. So it's not about YouTube, it's about access to the work of the board. And we've learned that live streaming is an effective way for people to understand the decisions and the working of the board and understanding the direction in which we're trying to go through the strategic plan. So I think it's effective to reframe that. When I think about the role of public comment prior to 3.5 years ago, most avenues of engaging with the district were not in place. I think there was there were kind of different ways of operating. And in the last 4 years, there have been a number of avenues in which the board, or a lot of clarity around how the community can engage with the board. And we've developed a community-driven strategic plan. And so if the role of public comment is for people to share with the board their concerns, their questions, their comments, we're not taking that away. Anybody can come to a board meeting in the defined time and share their concerns. So we are here, we would be, very present to understand what those questions or concerns would be. So that's not being taken away. And anybody can come and bring their phone and live stream through Facebook Live if we changed the broadcasting component to that. So that's not really even being taken away either. What's different, I think, is to think about what is the purpose? Why are people coming to us? They're sharing their concerns because they have questions, or they want the district to move in a particular direction, or they want to engage in the work of the district and the board. And so when we think about all the other ways that the district has developed to provide input into the work of the board, I would say those other avenues are going to be much more effective because they're linked with very specific efforts. Think about everything that was done for the bond issue and getting feedback on all the different kinds of town halls and surveys and input that was provided. People engaging through those processes probably had much more impact on the outcome than maybe necessarily coming and talking at public comment. There was, so I think that bottom line, when you think about program evaluation, the closer it's tied to the actual work is going to be more effective. So the more that people understand public comment is not the only way to change or affect or have input on the work of the board. It's important for us as board members to help educate our community about. So we're not taking public comment away. We're not stopping anybody else from broadcasting, but there is a very real practice of hijacking people's platforms to share alternative messages. And if we're trying to tell a story, think about how hard we struggle to tell the story of the district. Why would we give our platform away to add to the confusion when it's hard enough for us to get the story out ourselves? So I think that we have a responsibility to use our platform in a way that also conveys the most accurate information about what's happening in the district as well. And the only other part I wanted to say is that because you're concerned about if a board member, if a board member or an administrator says something inaccurate, because this part is interactive, there's an opportunity for that correction to happen. But public comment is not a didactic process. It's one way, and we don't spend time responding because it's not on the agenda. So any inaccuracies that might be conveyed here, there's an opportunity to correct that and where there isn't in the public comment portion. So I'll stop at that.
Mr. Stratton?
I had 6 points to follow up with, and Dr. Sinclair said it better than I could ever say it. So thank you.
I don't have anything further.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Borgman?
I guess the only thing I'll say is that we can ask clarifying questions. So, and I can't remember specifically what Ms. Ousley says when public comment is starting, but I think there is an opportunity. We do give the superintendent an opportunity to respond.
So we give him an opportunity to respond if what people are talking about is already on the agenda, because one of the requirements under COMA is that the Kansas Open Meetings Act is that you have to give the public notice of what it is that board members will be discussing. And so we provide notice of the agenda, and so that's what we're basically authorized to speak to under COMA. So folks who come and who speak to something that's not on the agenda, you know, while we can ask clarifying questions, and that sometimes doesn't go well, it's not something that we can speak to or even potentially come to a consensus on. For example, we had a few years ago someone come to ask us our opinion on a specific item that was not on the agenda, and we did not respond, because had we responded and had there been consensus among the board, technically at that point, that's as if we would have voted on something or made a decision as a body. And we can't do that without providing people the opportunity to come to speak to it or to have notice that it's on the agenda so they can reach out to communicate to us on it. So that's kind of the technical explanation for it, because I know it is very frustrating for people that we don't engage. And I know certainly sometimes there's a desire to, but in order to make sure we don't reach consensus on an item that has not been noticed, the practice of the board, as far as I know, has always been to only ask clarifying questions when that comes up. And that's why Dr. Fulton could potentially speak to something if something is raised during public comment that is already on the agenda.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that could be a potential way to correct something that, you know, potentially. I just think, you know, we're on a really slippery slope here. I think that our public really appreciates the opportunity to be heard. This has been an important tool for our community to be able to, especially for our teachers and frustrated parents. Gosh, during COVID, all those athletes that came and spoke about fall sports, I mean, it just was a really important part of our meeting. And, you know, some of those discussions, some of the things that people said in that public comment, we referenced in the meeting. And so, you know, if we're referencing in the meeting and public comment is not public, then, you know, people at home aren't really understanding the context of what we're saying and what we're referencing. And so, is it all the time? No. But, you know, there are times when we're having important conversations that it is helpful. And, I mean, I understand the intent of the public comment is really for, you know, whoever's speaking to have an opportunity to speak to the board. I mean, but let's be honest and let's be real. I mean, it's also really been a really important tool for everyone to get a message out that that they want to be heard, that, you know, I mean, I just keep going back to the mascot and how incredible it was that, you know, we had the chief come and speak and say simply, you know, people are not mascots. I mean, that was amazing for our community to hear that from him. So, and that was during public comment. So I just think, you know, taking public comment out of the public is worrisome and concerning.
So we need to decide, I think based off of the comments here, that we should have an opportunity to do a reading and a vote on BCBI. Because we do seem to have some differing opinions, but I think that we need to have an opportunity to bring a policy forward. We could make amendments, see up or down how they go, and then have an opportunity to vote.
Right, I think what's important for me right now is I just need to know what the guidance from the board is. You know, if there's modifications or desires of the board on BCBI, I just need to know what those are so I can provide those to the policy review committee or to the board as a whole, however the board desires to do that.
Okay. We're doing hard work, so let's just keep doing it and move on to item 3.03, which is our board manual updates.
Sorry, can I clarify what the next steps are with policy BCBI?
So if you have thoughts to provide to Dr. Fulton, provide them to Dr. Fulton, and then a policy will come to the board for us to vote on. If the policy committee meets again, doesn't meet again, all right, well then provide your comments to Dr. Fulton. We'll have an opportunity to make amendments during the meeting to whatever is brought to us, and then we'll have a vote.
So will it be first read at the June 28th meeting, a
Correct.
revised version of it?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify, because it's not, this does not, isn't it
This is
first
not a
reading?
reading.
Because it is
This
not
is
in
a-
public.
Right. This is a discussion item. It's not a first read. This is, Dr. Fulton needed additional information from us as a body as a whole so that he would know what his actions would be moving forward.
If it's a first read, though, typically, we just
read
then we just read it in, and, I mean, we just read
Do
the
we
policy
have-
and then take the comments, I guess, then you could send them to Dr. Fulton. I don't know if you need to, he'll bring something
Bring
forward or
something.
recommend something.
Do we have one meeting or two meetings in July?
One.
Okay.
It's not till late.
So,
Can I ask a question?
yeah, go ahead, Dr.
So
Simpson.
is the attached policy BCBI, I guess it's not stated as a first read because that would be an action item.
Correct. And we typically don't have action items
On
at board
workshop.
workshops. Like, the only action item we have today, we have to do to make sure people get paid.
Right, okay.
And it's not in public content yet, so it's not a public document at this point in time. It's in executive content.
Okay. So we'll do a first read. We won't vote at the end of the meeting. We'll have an opportunity to provide input on that, and then we'll come back in July for a vote.
Okay.
Does that work?
Well, just to be clear, we have the ability to do a first read and then a second read with vote. We can also do a first and final read. Is that part of what our operations are?
We could do a first and final. In light of the fact that people are probably going to have input for Dr. Fulton, it's probably wise to go ahead and do the first at the end of the month and the final in July, I would imagine, and cross our fingers on.
That sounds fine. I just wanted to make sure
Everything
we didn't paint ourselves into a future box and say we only do first reads and then second reads at the
Right,
next meeting.
okay, yes, we don't only do first reads. There are opportunities when we do a first and final read. I think based off of the nature of this one, it might be useful to go ahead and take our time. I know we have some exigency to the circumstance with regards to how we address the YouTube situation. So it's possible that we don't have it resolved and something else come up, but we can work it as a regular procedural item, I think.
I would share too, sorry, just as we're developing and this conversation about first and final versus a first read that will be followed by a second read, policy BDA, which we're working on through the policy review committee, does kind of begin spelling out when a first and final is an option, and it limits those circumstances to sort of very minor changes in language that have been recommended by KASB. So we wanted to create some boundaries around when first and final, just as an FYI, and something to pay attention to on that one.
I think it also states, though, if it's an emergency situation, it needs to be done. Sometimes we have things that have to be done very quickly. So it does state that, too. So I didn't know if this would be one of those situations, considering the amount of input that people might have on this one. But it does allow for that as well.
I appreciate the nature of potential exigency being necessary. I think based off of the weightedness of this decision, we should go ahead and do a first at the end of the month and then do the second in July, the second in the vote in July. Okay. All right. Well, let's keep going. Item 3.3, the board manual update. I think we can turn it over to Ms. Goodburn for an update on some of the less, contentious items, the more boring items, maybe, perhaps?
Well, I was just going to give
it.
an update really quickly to the board, because we
Yeah.
met in the retreat, and we got through about 2/3, most of the points in the board manual. And then, again, this is a revision of our board manual that was approved a few years ago. We've had a couple subsequent updates to it, but small updates when we've added things like board committees. That whole policy, I think, was added at one point. So we've been working on this for a very long time, actually more than a year, trying to update this, and it just, pandemic kind of got in the way too, and it just sort of got pushed away a little bit. But we've made a concerted effort, and I appreciate everyone, your time on that Saturday morning to spend on it. And we got through, I don't know, I think it was about 2/3. Most of the things that, again, I had a little grading sheet, and anything that was red, we covered then. And then in a subsequent, we didn't quite get through it by the time it was time to leave that morning. And so at Policy Review Committee, we took about an hour, and we went through the rest of the things that we didn't get to the rest of the points. And there was really minor things. I mean, we agreed on just about everything, all the changes that were made, had a few things that maybe we wanted to add. I have those. It's not very long. It's like 2 pages. I just, for whatever reason, I have not sent it to Ms. Wintering yet. She has already done all of the changes that we incorporated those into the document of the ones that we handled through the retreat. And then I will send her these, I promise. If I get out of here at a decent hour, I will do it tonight. And send these over to her so she has them, and then we will have the board manual document done. There's a couple things. The policy language, which is in BDA, is not currently in the board manual. So I'm not going to assume anything. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and write that according to BDA, and we'll see what happens at our next meeting, and then we can make any adjustments to that we need to. But I'm hoping that this board manual can go ahead and come before this body for approval soon, like in 2 weeks. So that's my goal. And
So,
I guess we can always go back and revise it if we need to, since something else might not be done till July. So
I was going to say, we might have to wait to vote on this one in July if it's going to, because part of this conversation now is the live streaming conversation. So, you know, if we move forward with BCBI and say, okay, we're going to pull it so that we just have 30 minutes dedicated to public comment, we don't do the rigmarole, we get to it, we get done, we get out, then this is now where the meat of the subsequent issue, what we live stream, how we live stream it, because everything is silent on this issue. So if we want to make this decision as a body as a whole, I think it would be useful. This is what governs us. The board manual is what governs us. The policy is what governs the district. If we put in there, so for example, do we want to reference in the board manual that we think it is useful to live stream the sub-policy and the Finance and Facilities Committee, because those are currently being live streamed due to COVID restrictions, because they are public meetings. The public did not necessarily have access to them during COVID, but for the fact that they were live streaming, but that was not part of our practice prior to COVID, but I think it's a useful practice potentially to hang on to after COVID. So we can have that conversation on what governs our practice in the board manual. So I guess I'll start again. So Ms. Hembry, do you want to lead us off on this one?
I would just ask if that will all be, I think I'm struggling with, like, I might feel one way about BCBI and a different way about this question of live streaming. That's very much where I believe I am. And I don't know whether we'll be asked to vote on the board manual. We've put a lot of really good hard work on that. And on that, I don't want to be asked to vote up or down on the whole board manual and have to vote no on something just because of this live cast issue. So I guess I'm asking kind of how we as a board plan to handle that conversation, because I don't want to have to vote no on all of our important hard work over the live cast issue, but I may disagree with that, just one change within the board manual. You know what I'm asking?
I think it would be an up or down vote on the board manual, and you would probably need to explain your vote. If you didn't, like if you supported the rest of the manual, you could explain a vote no on the board manual and to what it is that you supported in the rest of it. But how we put whatever we put into the board manual, whether it happens in the sub-policy committee or it happens here at the dais, we would then have a final vote on the board manual. So potentially there would be votes on amendments to the manual, but procedurally, I think we vote on the manual as a whole.
Well, I guess I would put in my 2 cents that this BCBI, I think it would be our discretion as a board to include the question of broadcasting and live casting in BCBI. And I would encourage us to consider that so that we aren't, I feel like we're taking this conversation and bifurcating it into 2 places, and it'd be much easier to have it in one place in terms of us just being able to vote as a board instead of putting it in BCBI for one question and in the board manual for the other about live casting.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents.
Ms. Goodburn?
I don't have any comments right now.
Okay. I don't think I have any comments right now. Dr. Sinclair?
I think I'm pretty clear on the task at hand, and I appreciate the way you clarified it. By virtue of any board manual or policy being silent on the practice of live streaming, we now, separate from how we structure public comment and the board meeting, it's one piece. The other piece is whether we leave it up to the executive leadership of the board, president and vice president, to determine what the uses of live stream are, or whether we make it a decision collectively of the board. That becomes then a question we struggle with, and whether whether a decision that we make. So by default, if we do nothing, it stays within the leadership of the board. If we want to do something more collectively, then it would go in the board manual as a matter of practice and kind of procedures. And Ms. Hembry is actually advocating for a different path, I think, of where that would be reflected in policy. So there's a couple of options moving forward. All right. And our comments are to go to Dr. Fulton and to you about what we're thinking, so policy committee can make appropriate changes. Is that correct?
I don't think the policy committee is meeting between now and our next meeting.
Okay.
Well,
Sarah's
we will
working on the
meet,
manual.
I guess we'll meet in July, I think. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if that meeting's set yet. No, I haven't seen, yeah. So we would typically, and so if we're having a first read on BCBI, then the policy review committee could look at that again in July if we hold that meeting, but there's no date set for that meeting right now.
So just as a technical question, do we want to address BCBI and then address the board manual, or do we want to do them concurrently? I guess that's something to think about too. Mr. Stratton, you look like you have something to say about that.
Well, I'm just going to react to that question. It depends what it says in BCBI. Chicken and egg, right? But I think ultimately we take formal action from a policy standpoint on BCBI, and then we simply adopt a board manual. So I think they're two different actions, but yeah, we would want to be clear in what is in both of those when we're voting. I will leave that to those that are going to take this input and craft it and place it in one place, and then we simply get back to the table here and discuss whether that's the place we want it to be in.
Okay.
And one of the pieces of input that I'll provide, and that is, you did talk about the committee's work. I would really like to see us continue to do YouTube of those committees, because, like for instance, we're doing finance and facilities this Thursday, and those meetings are chock full of really good information. And so, for fellow board members who aren't on these committees, it's great to be able to reference those things.
And I think broadly some sort of policy around broadcasting meetings would be useful, because like the policy review committee is not broadcast, finance and facilities is. Like there is not a lot of consistency about which subcommittee meetings of the board are or aren't broadcast.
Okay. Reverend Guy? Okay. Ms. Borgman?
I think perhaps another option would be, I'm kind of with Ms. Hembry on the, we've put so much work into the board manual, and, we really came together and made compromises and worked hard, and, and so perhaps that we could have an addendum that talks about, live broadcasting, public comment. I don't know. That may be an option to think about. Going ahead and passing the board manual as it is, and then considering an addendum with regards to, live streaming public comment. But ultimately, I would like to see policy BCBI rewritten in a way that is a little bit more, I guess, transparent for what we're trying to solve.
So I think what we can do when we discuss and debate BCBI when it's on a final read, so on the first read, we'll read it into the record, and then on the second reading, we can make amendments and then vote on it. And so anybody who wants to make changes to BCBI has the opportunity to do so from the dais, and then that's when we make the decision as the body of 7 on what we're going to do with it. And we can stagger the votes in July to where we would first vote on the policy and then deal with the board manual. And so I think one would be contingent on the other to see how BCBI goes, and then we can work the manual after the policy has been addressed, because some of it is contingent on what happens with the one vote. And that would be my thought on that procedurally, on how we address it. I guess we can shoot around one more time to get final thoughts. Ms. Embry?
Nothing to add.
Ms. Goodburn? Nope. Okay, well, thank you very much. We are moving on to item 4.1, the approval of the consent items. I'll seek a motion to approve.
I move approval. Sinclair?
Second, Borgman.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And then we have one action item tonight, item 7.1, approval of the classified salary schedule for 2021-2022. We do not typically take action during board workshops. We are taking action tonight on this item because it impacts people's salaries and their ability to get their raises in the payroll cycle on time. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Fulton.
Okay, thank you very much, and we are excited to bring this action item to you. Thank you for allowing us to put it on this agenda. I think it's important to classified staff. I'm going to have Russell Knapp actually kind of walk through this recommendation and why it's important to do this now.
Yes, thank you. So tonight is the action item for our classified pay groups. This group is mainly our hourly employees, so that would include your food service, custodians, paraprofessionals, educational aides, and there's a few yearly manager and secretarial positions in this. Why it's important to do tonight, because tomorrow morning we're going to start working on it immediately. We got to turn it around pretty quick because this will be reflected in the first biweekly paycheck in the new fiscal year, which would be July 9th. So the raise that's being recommended, it parallels the tentative agreement that the IBB negotiation team agreed to last week. So it's 1.45% on each of the classified schedules. There's multiple ones, but the base would go up 1.45. If the employee is eligible for a step, they'll receive a step. And then the health insurance is going to go up $36 a month. That will kick in, and that's the district contribution towards health. It's $36 a month. That kicks in January 2022 because health insurance is on a calendar year basis. So that's the proposal for your consideration.
I might add too, this does not address the agreement that was made with teachers regarding retention pay, and that is something that will be addressed for classified staff, will occur at a later time once the eligibility criteria are established.
I was going to move approval of item, sorry, I can't read it, 7.01.
Yep, thank you, Ms. Goodburn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Go ahead.
Second, Hembry.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I won't even ask. I didn't hear anyone not say aye. That gets us to the conclusion with board comments, item 8.1. Since Ms. Embry has been kicking it off for us all evening, we'll just go ahead and stick with her.
Gosh. I just wanted to briefly note, I know we're getting a lot of emails and communications about masks, and having a bit of a public health background, I would remind all of us that we have 2 months until school starts, and a lot can change with this virus in the next 2 months. So I'm trying to remind myself not to lose too much more sleep over a decision until time has passed and we have updated guidance from public health authorities. I personally have always committed to following guidance from public health officials, and at this point, we do not have final guidance from them for next school year. So I'm very watchful for what they're going to share, but whether you're supportive or opposed or whatever, I think there's so much that can happen in the next couple of months around transmission rates, vaccination rates in our community, vaccines for kids. So I would just invite everyone, especially folks at home who are listening, to be a little more patient than we are naturally inclined to be and see what we hear from public health officials. And then the second thing I wanted to do is just give a special shout out, as Jamie would say, to some of our teachers who have had to weather through moves. I know these bonds are all fantastic and exciting, and we get new buildings, and that's great, but there's also entire old buildings to clean out. So to folks at Deemer and Westwood View and others who've had to spend a bunch of time and energy, happened to be at Deemer when they were cleaning out their PTA closet, and it was quite interesting to see what they found in there after 30 years of being untouched. So thanks to all of our teachers who've done all the extra work involved in moving.
No comment.
Thank you, Ms. Goodburns. My only comment for tonight was just to say how much I appreciated the opportunity to attend graduations this year. It was so incredibly moving to have some of our first, district activities as a whole be to watch the students graduate and to move towards their amazing futures. And it just felt like a really nice way to transition from what has been, a very challenging year for everyone into what will hopefully be one that is less so next year. So for all the graduates, congratulations on making it through this year. It's definitely unforgettable and will go down in history, and we wish you the best of luck in whatever path you've chosen as you leave us. So that will be my comment for tonight. Dr. Sinclair?
I have nothing further to add to that. Thank you all for your thoughts.
A reminder that the Finance and Facilities Committee will be meeting at 4 o'clock on Thursday.
I don't have any comments tonight.
Ms. Borkman?
Just really proud of the hard work from the negotiation team for both Shawnee Mission as well as the NEA. So thank you all for coming together, and I'm grateful for, the work that everyone did. So thank you all.
We do not have executive session after this meeting this evening, do we? I need a refresher, right? None? Okay, good. Well, then that concludes our business for this evening. I hope you all have a good night.